Okay, today we'll be talking about probably one of the most talked about topic in social networking, which is providing customer support using social channels. And almost every second company that starts to build up some sort of presence online, it's because they want to try and support customers. So one of the first things that companies do when they go online in social networking space is mainly because they want to show to all their trustworthy customers and everybody else that they are there to help them, they are there to guide them, to support them, and maybe at times to give them some special deals and discounts to reward them for being with the company. So that's why we thought long and hard what this lesson should be, and then obviously we decided to go with a customer support because it is really probably the most, as I said, the most talked about, not just in the industry, but also in the academic literature as well. And so we thought that we'll bring to you some of the best practices that are shared from the research, from the reading and the literature that can be used when trying to integrate social networking channels for customer support. First things first, social channels are not there just because we want to sell something. They're not there for marketing purposes. Right? Now, this might go against what we talk about throughout the module, but we always said the most important thing when you think about social networking is to make sure that you're there because you want to connect and build up relationship with your audience, right? And then you want to make sure that obviously you start to begin with conversations, discussions and support using these channels. And then of course after you've done that, after you've built those connections, it is actually fine and acceptable to start and share with them whenever you have special deals and special sales and discounts for them. Because what? You need to make sure you're rewarding people that are engaging with you. Now, not all of them will be your customers, obviously, but you need to make sure you do that because that's got a potential for those visitors to turn into customers, and that's when we set the conversion rate. That's when the monetization process can start in. You might be able to increase the amount of visitors that come to the site. You might be able to increase the amount of subscribers you have on your YouTube channel. You might be able to increase your sales that you're offering during that time. And so that's why it's important to do that. Now, I thought I'd show you this. And this was meant to be a joke, so you were meant to laugh with this, but obviously it's not working out. Anyway, I can hear some fake laughing, which is always good anyway. But I wanted to show you this because it just kind of shows how some of the companies that are doing quite a good job with social networking online, sometimes they're a bit too worried that they're not hearing from customers. And they start to give them a call. Well, where have you been? You haven't tweeted in the last 3 days. What's happening? What did you have for lunch? You know? Where did you go with your partner? So things like that. Okay. Now, these are some of the things that we want to cover in today's lecture. We want to look into brand building, brand consistency, which is a very important element when it comes to social media, but also in other channels that you might use offline as well. We want to look at setting up employee presence. So how do you do that? How do you create that kind of culture and that kind of presence? Also, after that, you need to make sure that people know what to do once they are becoming more social on networking sites. Then you need to provide training, right? You need to tell people what they need to do to be able to do a good job and actually be able to become consistent throughout social networking spaces. Now, after that, of course, you need to be able to do what? You need to be able to monitor what you're doing, right? Now that you're there, you're online, you're telling your staff what they need to do, and you understand what are the processes that one can and cannot do when it comes to online engagement, you need to start to monitor that. And that's when tools come very handy, right? When you think of tools online, which we said are major websites that process thousands and thousands and millions of data, that's when tools comes very handy because they help us to scan and understand those social activities online. In other words, with a click of a mouse, they give us an opportunity to understand how well those activities online are playing for us and which is showing to be more successful and which should not. In other words, these are the tools that almost help us to get a bigger picture about our social presence. Now, understanding how well you're doing online after you've started to engage is absolutely essential. Because this should drive you towards your strategy, this should drive you towards what you need to do next, and also refining your plan, refining your content, and refining messages and updates that you're publishing regularly. So in other words, it's a fantastic eye-opener whenever it comes to the social space. But in the digital world, you've got to use software, you've got to use applications, you've got to use tools, because they enable all of these calculations behind the scene that we don't even see them, that to help us understand and get a clear picture of what happens online. And that's why these tools are very interesting indeed. Now, every second company that is a social networking site will use some sort of tool, some sort of software to be able to understand how well they're doing online. And you can do this, you can just go out and you meet any CEO of the company or any marketing manager, even in Mansfield or anywhere you go, it's probably quite a good idea to talk to them and understand what is the tool that they're actually using to monitor and understand how well they're doing with social space. Because you'll see that everyone more or less have decided to use one of the tools simply because it enables to manage that presence from one place only. So in other words, the tool becomes like a hub to manage social networking activities. Now, instead of having to go in different individual social networking sites, you can do all of those things from one place. In fact, some of the tools that are commercial ones that you need to pay for give you an opportunity also to plan what you're going to say. Which means you can tell to that tool, okay, well, why don't you publish my 2 free short videos of YouTube on Tuesday, on Thursday evening, and then on Friday morning? Because my audience, this is the time when they check their YouTube channel. So why don't you do that for me? On the other hand, you can say, why don't you publish these tweets during evening times between 8 and 9 on Monday, on Thursday, and then on Saturday? Because that's when most of my audience come to visit my Twitter timeline. So in other words, you can see how useful is that, because it helps you to become what? More efficient. Now, in the digital age we live now, and also in very competitive business environment we live in now, you've got to be very efficient how you spend your time, right? So this is when companies start to see why it's important to become quite good in using these tools. And that's why some of them do spend lots of money to pay for one of these packages, because they're actually quite expensive. Next thing is, of course, identifying current social activities. Now that you're there, you're doing a good job, you're engaging, you're understanding what's working, what's not, you need to start picking up on themes that you might want to focus more often when you're publishing the content for your business. Then, of course, financial benefits, that's when you start to see what is that you're getting in return. And of course, that also depends on how good you are in tracking and monitoring your presence. Being able to monitor your presence and being able to see who said what and how is that going to affect your own discussions online is absolutely essential. But you can't do that manually, and that's why these tools come handy. It'll be probably impossible, even if you were Microsoft, to go and check every single social networking space and every single blog or every single website to tell when people talk about Microsoft. It'll take thousands of people to do that, and it'll still not be able to do it. Because web is limitless. It just got so much information. And that is the only way to see and keep an eye on what's happening is through these tools. And that's why they are quite important. Now, let's go back to think about brand consistency. Brand consistency is very important indeed. Why? Because it sends a clear message to all your users that follow you on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn to know that that is the company they're dealing with. That's your band. That's the Coldplay, right? That's a band you like so much that you listen all the time. And whether you're in the Twitter timeline, whether you're in a YouTube channel or on Facebook, you know it's them. You know it's the band you love, or you know the band you care about. And that includes, what are those things? The things that help build this consistency are normally three things. You've got logo, you've got tagline, and you've got site link. You've got a website where you can go to find out more. You can go to book tickets for their tours, you can go to maybe buy one of their albums and things like that. So in other words, these are some of the three elements that are normally and important to be able to build a brand consistency and the themes around the business. Now, employee social presence. Now, how do you do that? Of course, you need to make sure that, as I said to you a few weeks ago, social networking presence does not work by having one individual in the company trying to do everything. And that's why lots of companies fail to succeed with social networking sites. Simply because they rely on poor young graduate that they employed, right, to do everything. Because they say, okay, you know, he or she knows what to do, just leave it to him or her because that will be okay. Everybody else, do what you've been doing so far and forget because everything will be fine. And then you end up in a situation where that poor individual, that poor graduate who just got a job and he or she is so excited about it, that he can't do it on his own. Because there's so many things he needs to talk to others to be able to reply back, and also there's so many things that he needs to check all the time. And it doesn't work. There needs to be a theme, there needs to be a culture within the company which is more about being social, being open and connecting and engaging with people online. It is really important. And if we don't get that right, that's when things start to go bad. Because you have someone who, whatever, can check everything you want them to check between 8 in the morning and 7 or 8 maximum in the evening, but after that they've got to get some time off. You know, they've got to have their own life. They've got to go out and have fun and things like that. So you'll end up having customers who engage with you, but no one from the company who's supporting them. And that is really important. Of course, some of those things go with names in terms of links that users that you're going to create for Twitter users and other social media users and profiles on space. We talked about this a few weeks ago when it came to Zappos and Dell as well. Also, links to the product, so you need to make sure that whenever you're creating something online, you are linking it somehow, somewhere to the product, and also link to Twitter, to other Twitter users within the company. Now, let's have a... Yeah. Okay, so when you see that, you get an idea about how, for instance, a company does that. For instance, what they try to do, they try to ensure that they have every single product somehow link to a profile, somehow link to a photo, an image, and something that you might be able to share at some point. Now, until now, sharing the products in e-commerce in general and online was really essential part. But integrating Twitter as an essential part of those product reviews, it's very important indeed. Why? Because you enable people to share even the products they might not buy, but they are willing to share with their friends. Now, as soon as somebody starts to share, as soon as one of my friends starts to share something on Twitter, then I'll probably have a look at it. I'll probably check that out, and then I might even end up buying it. So in other words, when you think about this, company has spent absolutely nothing apart from integrating Twitter in their product review. They spend nothing to get me to buy it. And I'm probably not even their customers to buy these products. But because a friend of my friend started sharing it, and then it ended up coming into my timeline, then I went and bought it. And you can see this, for instance, you'll start to see that customers start then to share things. They say, oh, by the way, I got this product, and then I quite like it, of course, why don't you have a look at it? So, as soon as they do that, they share their profile, and everybody else get connected, get to start following the story, and an opportunity might come for the business to reach out to more people. Now, we talked about employee training, right? You need somehow, somewhere, at some point, either have a consistency training where you tell the staff how they need to behave online on social space, but also make sure that you have a bit of a program to bring them up to speed with what's happening online. From starting profiles to starting to plan how often they're going to publish content, but also to give them an idea about what they can and cannot say. Because remember, whatever is said online is a public domain. And now, saying things in public is very different from saying things within a private network. And there are two major reasons for that. One is because we've said the search engines now index pretty much everything. And they're particularly interested with social networking activities. So, in other words, if somebody searches for something on Google and your post on Facebook was very popular, it's very likely that your Facebook photo, their Facebook content won't be shown somewhere in Google results. Now imagine if that thing was negative, would that work for you? Probably not. So that's why it's important to see. And the second thing is, of course, as soon as you've done that, you are making sure that everybody else will see those conversations that you're having online in your activities on social space. Now, how do you do that? Of course, the first thing you can do is start to help your staff or people working with you, offer them group support, or maybe even try and train them online somehow, somewhere, right? But another thing you can do is that you can start to make it clear to them, almost like a bit of a guide. I don't want to call it policy, but a bit of a guide what they can and cannot say. Now, of course, myself, Rich, and Dave, and Steve as well, we are, of course, careful of what we say online as we talk to you, right? We also have got our own meetings when we meet with each other and discuss how we can deal with things, how we can, of course, engage with you, what are the things that we can and cannot say. So we discuss some of these things with each other. We want to make sure, as much as possible, we're consistent with the messages, we're consistent with the content that we publish with you. Okay? Now, that is an important element also when it comes to supporting you, right? Now, lots of you will be tweeting and asking questions and everything, and what we try and do, we try and help you as much as we can, but also we discuss with each other before sometimes we will reply to some of your tweets. So in other words, there needs to be a bit of efficient communication within the team to be able to support customers and to be able to support people out there same way as we do with you. Then, the next thing, of course, is introducing social media channels. So, now that you're engaged, now that you have a consistency with the brand, now that everybody knows what they can and cannot say online, you need to start and measure these activities. You need to start and measure what is working and what is not working. And also get a clear idea about this investment you're making. Now, if you cannot track, if you're not tracking, if you're not measuring, it's like you're lost in the middle of nowhere. It's like you're putting so much effort to get to that point in time, but then you say, well, there's no such a thing, there's no point. There's no point because there's no milestone. And that means that you're not measuring, you're not engaging, you're not understanding how well those conversations are playing for you online. Now, the next thing is, of course, we talked about metrics. You need, now that you're starting to measure, you need to start to think about how you're going to report those metrics back. Are you going to share with each other with a team? How is that going to affect building up a marketing strategy, marketing campaign? Remember that social networking activities need to be key part of running a marketing department in any business. Until now, lots of companies totally ignored it. They said it's fine. We can have our marketing team as we always had and have just one person who looks after social and we'll be okay. But now they realize that social is a lot more than just tweeting. It is about building a culture, a business that is open. Which is a big shift in the way we run business. And that's why lots of businesses are not ready for it. They can't think of going out there and being open and being ready to accept customers' feedback, customer negative points, and customers being unhappy about the service and product. And that is one of the main reasons why lots of businesses say, no, we would better just stay off of social media because we don't think that's going to work for us. Now, what are some of the questions that businesses can ask and some of the questions that are recommended in general? You need to make it clear when you do these trainings, right? Most of the people need to know how they need to deal with complaints. Right? We live in the real world. We're going to let customers down, we're going to let people down, we're going to let students down, right? But how do we do that? How do you deal with complaints? Do you accept the fact that you couldn't manage to deliver? Or you're just not there when you wanted to see us, right? Or we arranged a meeting and I just didn't show up? So we need to be able to know how we can deal with that. Are we going to just tweet back and engage with you or maybe start to argue online? Or are we going to take these things offline and start to deal with them either via email or via the phone or face-to-face? Of course, what will be the protocol regarding off-topic messages? Now, in the business, you're always going to have customers who say things that are absolutely irrelevant to your company, to the business, to everything you do. Now, how are you going to deal with that? Are you going to ignore it? Now, ignoring it doesn't make the message go away. But as soon as you show to the customer that you're there, but obviously this piece of content is not relevant to those social activities online, then maybe they'll be able to understand and then they can move on. But ignoring it never works. What targets will you set for response time? Now, how do you think that you're going to be responding to people? Now, this is very important because now more and more often, customers and people that engage with us online expect automatically a reply. In fact, even if it's a Twitter, most of you still expect that I'll get back to you very soon, probably within an hour. Okay? And I try my best, but I can't always get back to you within an hour or 2 hours, sometimes even within 5 hours. But I try to do that at least within a day. So then you'll hear from me sometime during the day, because I can't just be on Twitter all the time. I've got other things to do. It's same for businesses, right? They can't do that all the time, but the best practice that is being shared so far is that as long as you can get back to the people following you, engaging with you, within 24 hours, they'll be okay. general practice, and in general practice from the research and also from the industry shows that if we are able somehow to get to within 24 hours to reply to our customers, we should be okay. Of course, how will you sort out problems and complaints, and how are you going to deal with that? Is that something that you're going to plan to have to deal with in the near future? You're going to just avoid it, you're going to think that everything is going to be fine. But we do know that things happen and mistakes are made, right? And preparing for them is going to be essential. So knowing how to deal with that is going to be very important indeed. Now that is when companies need to ask these questions and of course need to have this as a part of their strategy. Okay, monitor and manage Twitter customer support. Now, we all know, and also the research shows that Twitter is probably the most popular platform when it comes to customer support. Now, other platforms like Facebook and YouTube and Instagram and LinkedIn are used as well, but Twitter seems to be the most popular channel to use for customer support. Maybe because it's short, it's neat, it's to the point, is quite fast, and it can be real-time as well. It becomes quite an important element. Now, there are several tools that allow companies to do that, but what Zendesk does is that they turn those inquiries and those tweets into tickets for the people to deal with, for the employees to deal with. Now that's quite interesting, which means that you're not just finding that social media is important for you, especially Twitter when it comes to customers, but you actually make that the primary channel for customer support. And in other words, you cannot let these things just go away and ignore them. So what you're doing as a business, you are turning those tweets and those messages into tickets and then allowing employees to deal with them and reply to customers. So in other words, putting a process in place that enables us to do just that. Let's see, where do businesses fail most of the time? Well, these are some of the data from research, and you can see here that more than 50 brands, 56% did not respond to a single customer comment on their Facebook in 2011. Now, 2012, that wasn't that much of a difference. It was probably around 50%. So there's still half of the companies do not either delete their negative messages or ignore them totally. Most of them delete them, just so they look good, right? But deleting them, we all know from the practices, deleting them is never going to help. Because it's like trying to close your mouth. Trying to shut you down and say, you can't speak, you can't say anything. And we say, no, let me speak. Let me speak. You can't stop me from saying things that I feel about your company and about your product. So you're going to move from one place to another and say things that you want to say. And if you are shut down in Facebook, you can move on probably to Twitter, to a blog, or even YouTube. And we have all sorts of stories about the way how customers have been treated and the way how companies dealt with them. But we might be looking at some individual examples, maybe not tutorials. Brands ignored around 70% of customers complained on Twitter. Right? So that's another important element that shows how just bad companies are in responding to the customer views and thoughts and ideas. Which, remember, these are the things that nobody asked of them. Customers are just using these tools because they are efficient and a quick way of sharing their thoughts about a specific company. 50%, 55% of consumers expect a response within the same day online, while only 29% of them actually receive one. So as you can see now, there are lots of companies who totally ignore getting back to the customer within 24 hours. Now, I think 24 hours is probably a reasonable amount of time for people to get back to customers. Now, where is the biggest problem? Well, unfortunately, the disconnect between the customers and companies is actually growing. Some companies now are even more scared about what they're doing online and saying, it's too risky, let's just not go there. And they think that by not being there it's actually safer, but it's not. And the research consistently shows that not being there is actually riskier than being there. Because when you're not there, it's like you're not in this room. And how the hell can you tell what I'm talking about? So look at it this way. But then if you're here, then whether you agree or disagree with me, at least you're here and you can hear me, you can see what I'm talking about. And it's the same in social. If you're not in the crowd, if you're not out there, how can you tell? In fact, we might be covering all sorts of things that might be important to you and what you want to do next. But if you're not here, you don't understand. We sometimes might be talking bad things about you too. But you're not here. So, we can do it, right? And that's what customers do. Customers are going to go online, they're going to share their view. Most of them are going to be genuine in telling their views, sharing their views about the companies and how unhappy they are. And where are the businesses and companies? They are just trying to avoid as much as they can not to be online. Trying to avoid an opportunity not to just connect with customers, but show to them that they care about them and they want to help them. Now let's look at some examples. I'm sure you all remember this one, but this was quite a big one for Apple when there was a problem with the antenna in iPhone 4, which couldn't pick up the signal, and if you covered the iPhone in all the sides where the antenna was, you wouldn't get any signal at all, right? And it started with some bloggers and techie guys who kind of went out there and tested, and they were like, hey, we see there is a problem here, right? There's a bug in the iPhone, there's a problem with the iPhone, let's share with the world. And that's all started with that one. And then you had some powerful bloggers talking about it, and then soon it was in the media, it was everywhere. And at that time, Steve Jobs, they built up the biggest lab you could think of to test mobile phones, to test the way how mobile phones receive the reception and how well they receive signal, and especially with the iPhones, how well that works. And they did find out that in the end, that was a problem, right? And the reason why this became such a big issue, it wasn't because company talked about it, because obviously they left till quite late, until they seen that they had nothing to do but deal with it. That was because it went from a blog post to social media, to Twitter, to Facebook, to YouTube, people creating YouTube videos while covering their iPhones, and then it went to TV, and so it was almost like a PR disaster, right? And so what they said, okay, well, we've done the testing, and we can see that there is a problem there, and what we're doing is that we're giving out the free bumpers for the iPhone. Probably have one of these anyway. And so you received that. I did have an iPhone 4, but I didn't get the bumper. I didn't want to use it, because I think my iPhone was okay. So, but however, there was a huge number of customers who did have problems with that. But what the company did, they kind of tried to sort this problem out by giving free bumpers to everyone, and it kind of settled down a little bit. But could they have done it a better job? Yes, of course. As soon as they've seen that the message was spreading out across social networking channels, they could have immediately done something about that, right? But they expected until the thing was so talked about across the web, across the TV channels and everywhere else, then that's when they said, okay, maybe we should do something about it. And then you had the CEO at that time, Steve Jobs, talking about it. So, what to do? Well, these are some of the practices that are shared from the research that is done around social and networking channels. If companies want to avoid these kind of problems, they need to know that social needs to be an integral part of a business. In other words, what we said earlier, social networking needs to be an important part and integrated within your marketing channels. Because only that way you can tell when things are not working out well. And then you'll keep an eye and you say, okay, alarm ringing, right? There is some problem somewhere, what can we do? And you deal with it straight away on time, before it becomes a PR disaster. Remember, building brand takes years, takes decades, right? Building big brands takes decades, but destroying them takes days, right? Now, it's a very important thing to keep in mind. Create humanized response is not really automatic thing, right? Most of the time companies do everything they can to try to use automatic type of features in these tools online that allow us to, say things, send thank you letters and automatic responses to customers without having that human touch. We know it. We know when there's a server sending us a letter, we all know it. We know when the server sends us a retweet or a tweet message. We know that it's not human there, it's just an automatic thing, and we hate it, right? So, it's important to do that. Of course, as soon as you integrated your social channels within your business, you can deal with the problem early, on time, and in advance. And then, what happens? We set social media as like a gold mine. Right? Because there's so much information out there. You're not even asking for it. And that's the beauty of it. Even as a business, you're not asking for it, right? You're just getting all of that for free. But are you using it? Now, if you're not on social space, you don't even get a chance to see it. Speeding up response time. Now, that's another thing, because if you're on social, you need to be able to have some sort of timeline when you're going to respond back to the customers. Of course, we said that 24 hours was pretty much a practice that is followed by lots of companies. Of course, this is an important thing. You need to tell your visitors, your customers online, when can they expect to hear from you. In fact, this is like managing their expectations. And this is why, for instance, even when we started with the module, I was trying my best, we were trying our best, to try and understand what is you expecting from the module. And then see what other things we will cover and things that we will not cover. So in the end, you will know what you expected throughout the module, rather than going to the end and saying, that wasn't good enough at all, because that's not what I was looking for, right? And so that's when we kind of tried our best to get an idea of what you're looking for in the course. Lifetime customer. Now, companies don't realize by creating a Twitter address or Facebook page in the market promotes their business, they're opening up a new channel to get customer feedback. So in other words, again, it's an opportunity to use all this content that is being published online. It's an opportunity for the businesses, an opportunity for you to get free information and free feedback on your products online. In other words, we know another very important part of using social networking sites is because we want to build those personal connections, right? At the end of the day, we're humans and we want to be looked after. And that's when social media comes in, because it helps us to build these personal levels of connections. And in other words, there's nothing more powerful than that. Because it's very annoying when you get all these thankful letters and greetings from servers, but not the real people. Now, these are some of the examples of companies doing it very well, and you can read all of them. I'm not going to go into details on every one of them, but I'll probably pick up on some of them. Now, in 2010, when we had the Ash Cloud problems, and of course everything was a chaos in airports and everything, a company that I picked up that did quite a good job was the KLM. In fact, that time I was not in the UK, I was stuck in Abu Dhabi, which wasn't a bad idea. But the way how KLM dealt with it was really good, because what they did is that they built up a rebooking tool for all the customers to allow them to rebook their flights as soon as possible using their reference number, right? So in other words, they said, okay, we have a problem, what do we do with it? And then when they checked what was happening on social space, they went and checked everything that people were saying online and said, hold on a second, what can we do? Let's just quickly build up something that enables people to rebook their flights because we can see that some of the flights are taking off now and we can start to get back on the routine. Of course, another example is probably Zappos, because they do make their customers feel like rock stars, because sometimes you might even, if you live somewhere in the US, you probably might even ask them where's the nearest pizza place as well when you feel like you want to get a pizza that night, and then probably somebody from their team will answer you with an answer about what you're looking for. And that just shows how interested they are to go a step forward to build up connections with you. And they understand the power of social. Now there are so many examples, but one that I really like is when a customer was interested to buy a pair of shoes from them, right? And they found the shoes, but they didn't find the right size for them. So they were so disappointed that they asked Zappos if they could check whether they have the right size of those particular shoes for that customer. And they said, no, we don't have, but here is the link to our competitor's website where you can get exactly the same size you're looking for. So they pretty much sent the customer to another competitor's site just to make sure that the customer was getting the product that they really wanted. Now that's just an example of what I think is very powerful, because it shows that they're not just necessarily trying to sell, but they're trying to build connections. They're trying to deliver, as Tony Hsieh says most of the time, to delivering happiness, which I think they do a brilliant job. Of course, another one is lots of people talk about return on investment, and even us, we asking you to kind of look and identify ways that companies are what? Getting the benefits of social presence. Now, return on investment comes different ways. It's not just necessarily money, but it's also building brand awareness. But in this case, it can be about what? Receiving less telephone calls. So now calls are expensive, right? Running a call center is very expensive. So you get cut some costs in there. Of course, you get cut on emails. Now, as soon as you have a problem as a customer, you're going to start asking questions and then trying to get something back from the company. But of course, if you have a very good presence online, you're cutting lots of emails, because you're dealing with it, and the customer will get a reply back, and they will start to avoid the problem. Of course, another thing that can be done is that companies don't need to freak out. They can just be prepared, right? And they can be prepared to deal with customers, and also they shouldn't be promising what they can't deliver. In most cases, the marketing messages are just so brilliant. You're going to think, God, this is like the best company in the world to be buying from. And then as soon as you become their customers, it's terrible. The customer support is terrible, and everything is worse you can think. And you can look at all sorts of examples. If you want to become a new user or a new customer for any companies in a local that you're looking for, from a telecommunication company to like a local shop, you have a direct phone that you can call, and you'll get support straight away, and they'll be ready to sell you something in a matter of seconds. But as soon as you need some sort of help and you have to make that phone call to get some customer support, you have to wait 15 to 20 minutes in the line. Now, that just doesn't add up, does it? And so it's very important too for the companies to do the same thing with social media. You shouldn't be promising something you can't deliver. And if you look at most messages on digital marketing campaigns from the biggest companies, lots of them are always over-promising and under-delivering, most of the time. Now, how do we do that? This has been probably the hottest topic I've received from most students about the time plan. Like every one of you asked me about time plan. Because obviously this is an important part whenever you start to build up a social business, a social company, right? And that includes That includes time, resources. When we say resources, we mean people, and then also knowing what goes out and when. Now, there are all sorts of ways you can do that. You can do that in a daily basis or weekly basis, or you can do that in a monthly basis, right? But because the social media is so frequent, right, that you have to publish so much, you can't just have everything planned for the next 12 or 24 months. It's just impossible. But what you can do, you can actually have between a month and 3 month plan of what your engagement is going to be online. What are the key things that need thinking about? First thing is, of course, knowing what theme you're going to be talking about. Is it going to be a funny theme? Is it going to be a special offer theme that week? Is it going to be customer support? What is going the theme to be on that week, on that day, in different social channels? The next thing you're going to be thinking about is, who are the people? What are those resources that you need, right? Who's going to be looking after these different channels? And you need to know that. Now, for the companies in your case, it's not that you're going to know for ASOS who's doing all of that, because you just don't have access to the company, right? But you can, based on the research that you have done, you should be able to approximately get a good estimate about how much that is actually spent in there, how many people work in that department, right? The other thing, of course, is that you need to know which channel will be used which day, and who's going to be pretty much, how many resources, how many people are going to be responsible for that piece of content that goes live. And of course, as soon as you've done that, you start to get a bigger picture of how you're going to support, how you're going to manage that social media, those social media activities. So unless you have a bit of a plan, you're like lost. Okay, it's like jumping in the car and just driving but having no idea where you're going to get to. Maybe you have all the food you need in the car, you've got good music, yeah? You've got good friends with you and you're having a good time, but where are you going? So this is the bit of a plan where you know where that destination is, right? Where is it that you're trying to get? And having clear ideas about themes, messages, and people that will be looking after these profiles is very, very fundamental. And of course, as I said, it is impossible, all of you, to get it spot on and get it right. We don't expect you to do that. But what we expect you to be aware and cover these things, right? And we expect you to show us that from the readings that you've done, you have a good idea more or less about this, right? And those information, those ideas come from the reading. And if you come to me and say, I don't know, I don't work for that company, I have no idea, how can I tell, right? Well, that just shows me that you haven't done any reading, because if you've done some reading, you'll have a good idea. You won't know 100% how much and who's looking after specific social channels, but you'll get quite a close idea about that. And that will be backed up by research and the reading that you've done, which shows that what? You've done the reading, you looked at the books, you looked at the journals, you looked at other publications, and you looked at the real company's websites and social channels, right? And then you built up an idea that is then supported by research. It shows as an evidence that what? You're coming out with those arguments and discussions because you've done the homework and you've done the reading and you have quite a good idea about that. So this way, you have ticked the box, you have covered the time plan, and the way you organize is totally up to you. That is just an example, right? But how you do it is totally up to you. And you will not be marked down for organizing it differently, right? But you'll be marked down for not covering it at all. But as soon as you cover and what you're trying to do, then it's really important. And I just want to show you quickly, this was a top UK brands on social media 2012 last year. Innocent is on the top star ones, GitCam, Cancer Research UK, so quite interesting brands on the top list there. And exercise for next activity is going to be this, and we want you to choose one of the companies and identify and see what is the real customer support that they are doing in different social networking channels. Thank you very much.